Inside the fight to fix women's prisons, the truth lawmakers ignore. Subscribe for more real crime stories. Like, share, and join the discussion below. The chilling moment arrived at midnight inside the dimly lit corridors of the Alabama Department of Corrections facility, known as Julia Tutwiler Prison for Women in Wetumpka. A corrections officer slipped into the shower area unseen, camera-blinded, and unchecked. He watched, he touched, he forced a woman in custody into a degrading act. And those screams, those whispers, finally triggered a federal investigation. The United States Department of Justice, DOJ, found that Tutwiler had become a place where women lived in constant fear of guards who had power over their bodies and their futures. Department of Justice. The report concluded this was no isolated misdeed. It was institutional. The Eighth Amendment rights of the incarcerated women had been violated not once, but systematically. As the investigation closed in, prison records showed pregnancies resulting from guard inmate sexual assaults, complaints dismissed as unfounded, and women retaliated against for speaking out. The Guardian, one former inmate, later described the environment as a daily barrage of sexually explicit verbal abuse, and that's what the DOJ called it in its findings. And yet, just when federal agents were about to file a landmark settlement with Alabama to force reform, a settlement that many believed might finally usher in change, a new leak of internal records revealed that guards continued to escort inmates to remote work assignments where supervision was minimal, isolation rife, and abuse possible. The documents detailed assignments tied to factory work, laundry, outside the unit tasks where the women were most vulnerable. So the question now, as lawmakers publicly promised reform and safety, behind bars the system kept running. Would the settlement mean meaningful change, or simply public relations cover while the abuse kept happening? The lights flicker in dormitory A, guards exchange whispered talk about keeping quiet, and somewhere a woman in custody wonders whether she'll ever be safe again, or heard. As the DOJ prepared its complaint, one corrections officer who had been assigned to the remote work detail vanished from duty without formal investigation. What happened to him, and what did he know? The files were locked away. The next chapter will reveal what the women came to believe, that lawmakers and corrections officials had known for nearly 2 decades and ignored it. Years before the Department of Justice descended on Julia Tutwiler Prison for Women, the warning signs had been there, glowing like emergency lights no one wanted to see. The year was 2007, when advocacy groups first began sending letters to the Alabama legislature. They detailed stories from mothers, daughters, and grandmothers behind bars, all echoing the same pattern: sexual threats, humiliation, and silence. The state promised investigation and review, but little changed. Tutwiler remained overcrowded, understaffed, and unmonitored. For women like Cynthia Stewart, a nonviolent offender serving time for a low-level drug charge, the punishment went far beyond her sentence. She was assigned to laundry duty, a section hidden from main hall cameras. One afternoon, she told her cellmate she couldn't take the harassment anymore. The next day, she was written up for insubordination and transferred to isolation. Her complaint disappeared, stamped resolved. That was the system's quiet way of saying, "Don't speak." When local reporters from the Montgomery Advertiser began investigating in 2012, they discovered something alarming. Prison administrators had already received more than 200 sexual abuse allegations over the previous 2 decades, most dismissed for insufficient evidence. Montgomery Advertiser, 2012. Some of those cases even listed the same correctional officers' names, men who had remained on the job for years. It was an open secret, one retired officer later said. Everyone knew what went on there, but you didn't talk if you wanted to keep your job. The deeper the journalists dug, the more disturbing it became. Federal auditors found that the prison's bathrooms had no working locks. Cameras covered corridors, but not living units. And the women? They were watched, stripped, or coerced under the guise of discipline. A 2014 DOJ report confirmed it. Tutwiler had a toxic, sexualized environment. Lawmakers received that report, every name, every detail, and yet the budget for oversight was cut that same year. Public outrage came and went. There were press conferences, promises, and task forces. But behind closed doors, change moved slower than paperwork. Alabama's prison commissioner at the time called the findings disturbing but warned against politicizing correctional reform. To survivors like Stewart, it sounded like another way to say, wait. Then, months after the DOJ settlement talks began, an internal memo leaked. It revealed that some state officials had known about the abuse culture at Tutwiler since 1995 and had chosen not to act because it would invite federal interference. The women's advocates called it betrayal. Lawmakers called it historic mismanagement. But to the women inside Tutwiler, it felt like proof that no one ever intended to fix anything. Days after the leak, one of the key whistleblowers, a former nurse who documented years of ignored complaints, was found missing from her Montgomery home. Her car was left in the driveway. The only thing gone was her laptop. The disappearance of the whistleblower, Marianne Brooks, a licensed nurse who had spent 12 years at Julia Tutwiler Prison, sent shockwaves through Alabama's correctional system. She had been one of the few staff members willing to speak with federal investigators and journalists. Her notes contained hundreds of entries, dates, names, and medical reports detailing injuries that matched inmate accounts of assault. When she vanished, so did her laptop, the only digital copy of those files. The search for Brooks began quietly. Local police said there were no signs of foul play, but reporters from the Montgomery Advertiser pressed harder. They revealed that, only a week before she disappeared, Brooks had been subpoenaed to testify in a civil rights lawsuit against the State Corrections Department. When the DOJ team requested her documents, officials claimed they were unable to locate them. That single phrase, unable to locate, became a national headline. Public outrage reignited. Protesters gathered outside the Alabama State Capitol holding signs that read, "Where is Marianne?" and "Protect women, not predators." For the first time, national outlets like CNN and NPR aired extended segments on Tutwiler Prison. Survivors came forward on camera, their faces blurred, voices shaking as they described years of silence. One woman said, "We were treated like we weren't people, like we didn't exist unless they needed a statistic." Inside the State House, lawmakers scrambled. Some called for resignations. Others blamed a few bad apples. But when the DOJ released its full report in 2014, the truth became impossible to ignore. The abuses weren't just the fault of individual officers. They were the product of decades of political neglect, budget cuts, and indifference. DOJ Report, 2014. Reform followed, at least on paper. Cameras were installed. Staff underwent new training. A federal monitor was appointed. But the deeper issue, overcrowding, lack of mental health care, and systemic retaliation, remained. Alabama's women's prison population kept rising, while funding for reentry programs stayed stagnant. Lawmakers celebrated historic progress, yet many survivors called it a band-aid over a bullet wound. As for Marianne Brooks, months later, her car keys were discovered near a wooded area 20 miles outside Montgomery. No other evidence was ever found. Officially, her case remains unsolved. Unofficially, her former colleagues believe she paid the price for knowing too much. The women she once treated now remember her as a hero, a rare voice in a system designed to silence them. One inmate's letter, later published in The Guardian, read, "They tell us prison is about justice. But if justice lived here, Marianne would be safe, and so would we." And so, the fight to fix women's prisons continues, a fight lawmakers promise to win but rarely enter themselves. Tutwiler still stands today, its walls freshly painted, its corridors fitted with cameras. But ask any woman who's lived there, and she'll tell you, the real problem was never the walls. It was the people who looked away.